I didn't notice anything unusual about Mrs. Alden at first. She lived 2 doors down from me, in our quiet little cul-de-sac, just outside of Harrisburg. She was one of those older neighbors everyone sort of looks after, without ever formally agreeing to. You know the type, friendly, sharp as a tack, always waving from her porch swing, with a mug of tea balanced in her hand. She lived there longer than any of us, long enough to have seen the neighborhood go from farmland to subdivisions, long enough to know every house's history, and every family's secrets. I'd check in on her sometimes, usually when I was walking my dog, after work. She always insisted she didn't need help with anything, but she loved to talk. I'd stand at the end of her driveway, and she'd launch into some story from the 70s, or tell me about her grandkids in Oregon. She never got to see much anymore. She reminded me of my own grandmother, the one I lost years ago. That familiarity made it easy to care about her, easy to notice when things felt off. It started on a Wednesday. I came home late, around 9, after a long day at work. My street was usually dark, and still by that hour, but as I pulled into my driveway, something caught my eye. Her porch light was off. That might not sound strange, but she never turned it off. Not once, in the 5 years I'd lived there. She even joked that it was her lighthouse for lost souls, and it stayed on, all night, every night. I told myself, she probably just went to bed early, or forgot. But the next morning, when I took my trash to the curb, I noticed her cans weren't out. I knew trash day was practically a ritual for her. She usually had them out by dawn. She'd even texted me once, to remind me when I forgot. So I walked up to her porch, and knocked. Her house was dark inside, curtains drawn tight enough, that I couldn't see anything through the windows. I knocked again. Then a third time. Nothing. Not even the shuffle of slippers, or her calling out, "Just a minute, dear," like she always did. A pit formed in my stomach. I tried to brush it off. Maybe her daughter picked her up for a visit. Maybe she'd had an appointment early that morning. But something felt wrong. I tried her phone. It went straight to voicemail. But that wasn't new. Her cell was ancient and constantly dying. I told myself I'd wait and check again after work. I didn't have to wait that long. Around noon, while I was at my desk eating lunch, my phone buzzed with a new voicemail notification. The number was unfamiliar, no caller ID, just a blank line of digits I didn't recognize. I put it on speaker and listened while I sorted paperwork. At first, I thought it was static. A soft, uneven crackling. But then I heard her. Clear as day. Her voice shaky, strained, saying my name. "Please, help me." I froze. The rest of the message was just a series of panic breaths, like she was trying to say more, but couldn't. And then, the call cut off. I must have listened to it 10 times, before I stood up from my desk. My chest felt tight. I called the number back, but it didn't even ring. Just an automated message, saying the number was not in service. I left work early, and drove straight to her house. The porch light was still off. The curtains were still shut. I walked around back, and peeked through the kitchen window. Nothing looked disturbed, but it also didn't look lived in. Her plants were drooping. The little radio she always kept on low wasn't playing. I knocked on her neighbors' doors, asked if anyone had seen her. No one had. A few people shrugged it off. She's probably visiting family. She's older, maybe she needed a break. But I couldn't shake that voicemail. The way she said my name, the fear threaded through it. I called the police. They sent out an officer, who did a quick welfare check, but he couldn't enter the house without signs of forced entry. He knocked, called her name, peered through the windows, and then turned to me with that practiced, sympathetic half-smile. "She's probably with family," he said. "Or maybe at a doctor's appointment. We'll file a report, but it's likely nothing." I stayed outside for a long time after he left. Something told me this wasn't nothing. That night, just after midnight, I got another voicemail. Same unknown number. I didn't even wait. I hit play immediately. This time, she wasn't calling my name. She was crying. Quiet, choked sobs. I could hear her trying to speak, but her words were swallowed by fear. Then, faintly, so faint I almost missed it, I heard a banging sound, like someone pounding on a door. I called the police again. They agreed to perform another welfare check the next day. But I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, half expecting it to ring again. The next morning, I called the utility company, under the guise of being a concerned relative. I wanted to know if her services were active: water, electricity, anything. They said everything had been shut off. Not recently. Weeks ago. Now. I was panicking. I kept thinking about those little details: the porch light going dark, the silence inside her house, her trash cans untouched, the voicemails. By the time the second welfare check happened, I was already pacing outside her house. The officer came back out, after a few minutes, and shook his head. She's not here. The place is empty. I asked if they'd broken inside. He said no, the door was unlocked. That stopped me cold. Mrs. Alden never left her door unlocked. Not in this neighborhood. Not anywhere. He told me again that they file a missing person report, but that these things often turn out fine. The whole time he spoke, I kept glancing at her darkened house, feeling this creeping dread crawl under my skin. But none of that compared to what happened a few hours later. I finally called her daughter. I had her number from one of those neighborhood phone lists that get passed around during block parties. When she picked up, she sounded surprised to hear from me. I explained everything: the porch light, the voicemails, the unlocked door. She didn't interrupt me until I mentioned the calls from her mother's number. There was a long silence. Then she said, quietly, firmly, "That's impossible. My mom's phone was disconnected 3 months ago. It's been dead, in a box, in my attic ever since." I didn't know what to say. I didn't even realize I was shaking until I heard my keys rattling in my hand. I asked if she was sure. She said she was the one who canceled the plan and took the phone. Before she hung up, she told me something else, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up. My mom hasn't been to that house in almost 3 weeks. I asked her where she was, and the daughter hesitated just for a second. That's part of why I'm calling the police again today. She's missing. I sat down on my front steps, staring at her empty house across the street. And for the first time all week, I let myself feel what had been simmering just beneath the surface. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a glitch or a random call or some mix-up with the phone company. Someone had her. Someone was using her phone. And somehow, for some reason, they were calling me. I didn't go back inside my house for a long time after that call with her daughter. I just sat there on my steps, gripping my phone so tightly my hand hurt, trying to make sense of all of it. The cold kind of settled into me from the inside out. I kept replaying Mrs. Alden's voice in my head, the trembling way she said my name, the panic in her breathing. I'd heard fear before, real fear, and that's what it was. By the time I finally went back inside, the sun was already low enough to cast long shadows through my living room. My dog, Daisy, could sense something was wrong. She kept pacing, whining at the windows, glancing at me like she expected me to fix whatever was happening outside. I tried to settle myself by turning on the TV, but I couldn't focus on anything. My mind was stuck on that phrase. Her phone has been dead in a box in my attic. It didn't make sense. None of it did. And the more I tried to rationalize it, the more I felt like someone was pulling invisible strings, just beyond my field of vision. Around 7 p.m., I got a knock on my door. My heart jumped before I even stood up. When I opened it, 2 police officers were standing there, one from earlier, and another I hadn't met yet. Behind them, parked along the curb, was a patrol car with its lights off. The first officer asked if they could come in to clarify some details. I stepped aside. They walked into my living room, all polite professionalism, but I noticed the younger one scanning the place, corners, windows, the floor. That put me even more on edge. They asked me to replay the voicemails. I pulled them up on speaker, hands trembling a little, as the first one filled the room. Mrs. Alden's broken whisper. The shaky breaths. The dead silence behind it, like she was somewhere hollow and closed off. Then the second voicemail, her crying, the faint banging. The younger officer's head snapped up at that part. He exchanged a quick look with the older one, the kind of look cops give each other when something doesn't sit right. They asked if I recognized the phone number. I didn't. They wrote it down anyway. Then the older officer asked me something I didn't expect. Have you noticed anyone watching your house recently? That question alone felt like ice water down my spine. I told him no, not that I could recall. He nodded slowly, but his eyes lingered on the front window again, like he didn't entirely believe me. Then the younger one asked the part one had been dreading. Are you sure the voice you heard is your neighbor's? I stared at him. Yes. I talk to her all the time. I'm certain. He scribbled something in his notebook and said nothing. They stayed another 10 minutes, asking about anyone who might have access to my number, whether I knew any of Mrs. Alden's family members personally, if she had mentioned anyone new in her life. She hadn't. She barely left her home. When they finally left, I felt drained, like I'd been swimming against a current all day, and didn't realize I was drowning until I stopped moving. I tried to eat dinner, but everything tasted like cardboard. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of my bed, and stared at my phone. Part of me kept checking for a new voicemail. Part of me prayed I wouldn't get one. Around 11, I finally started dozing off. I don't know how long I was asleep before Daisy's growling woke me up. Not barking, growling. Low, continuous, the kind she only made when she sensed danger. I sat upright and listened. At first, I thought it was just the owl settling. But then I heard it, the soft crunch of leaves, outside my bedroom window. Someone was in my yard. I froze, barely breathing, and listened again. Another step. Slow. Deliberate. Too close to mistake for an animal. I reached over and turned off my bedside lamp, so whoever was out there couldn't see me as clearly. Daisy was still growling, her body tense, staring straight at the window. I leaned forward, just enough to part the curtain by an inch. Someone was standing at the side of my house. A dark figure, motionless, almost blending into the shadows. I couldn't make out their face, or even their build clearly, just the silhouette of a person, standing too close to my house to be an accident. I watched them for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, they lifted something to their ear. A phone. My phone buzzed in my hand. A voicemail notification. My heart jumped into my throat. I jerked the curtain shut and backed away, pulse pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I didn't check the voicemail. I couldn't. Not while the person who left it was still outside my window. I grabbed my baseball bat from under the bed and moved carefully toward the stairs, every instinct screaming at me to hide, run, fight, I didn't know what. Halfway down the stairs, my phone buzzed again. Then again. 3 more voicemails. When I reached the front door, I heard something behind me, a soft tap, coming from upstairs. Tap. Pause. Tap. Like someone knocking from inside one of the rooms. Daisy bolted behind me, whimpering, her tail tucked so tight it almost disappeared. I didn't go back upstairs. I couldn't. I unlocked the door, stepped outside barefoot, and ran straight to the police officer's house on the next block, the one I knew took late-night shifts. I pounded on his door until he opened it. When I told him someone was in my yard, possibly in my house, he didn't hesitate. He grabbed his service weapon, radioed for backup, and ran with me back to my place. When we reached my backyard, the figure was gone. But in the soft dirt beneath my bedroom window, there were footprints. And on my window itself, wiped clean except for one small, intentional circle, was a smudge that looked like someone had pressed their forehead against the glass. Watching me sleep, the officers searched my house top to bottom that night. Every room, every closet, even the attic. They didn't find anyone. But that didn't bring me any relief, because something about the way they moved through the hallways told me they expected to find someone. Their flashlights lingered on certain corners too long. They didn't say it out loud, but I could tell they were unsettled. When they came back downstairs, the older officer, the same one from earlier, asked me to show him the voicemails I hadn't played yet. I didn't want to. Something inside me resisted the idea of hearing them while the house still felt warm from another person's presence. But I handed him the phone. He put it on speaker, and the 3 of us stood in my living room like we were about to listen to a recording of our own fates. The first new voicemail was nearly silent again. Just breathing. But the breathing wasn't Mrs. Alden's this time. It was deeper. Slower. Male, maybe. Or someone trying to hide their real voice. It was impossible to tell. The officer frowned and turned the volume up. And then, faint, almost like it was coming from the bottom of a well, I heard her voice again. Please, don't let him. The message cut off. The younger officer and I looked at each other at the same time. He whispered, "That's her," and I could see goosebumps rise along his arms. The second voicemail was worse. It started with a scraping sound, something dragging across a hard floor. Then a sudden bang, like someone had kicked a door. Then my name whispered, broken. But the third voicemail, the third one, made both officers stiffen. Because this time, it wasn't just her voice. There was a second voice in the background. A man's voice, low and muffled, but angry. You couldn't make out the words. It sounded like he was too far from the phone, but there was no mistaking the tone. He was yelling at her. She was pleading. And then, at the very end, before it cut off, the voicemail captured something else. A door slamming. A lock clicking. And what sounded unmistakably like the chime of a truck turning over its engine. When the message ended, silence filled my living room like smoke. The older officer finally cleared his throat. "We're sending these to the detectives." Immediately, they radioed in additional units. Not for my house, but for a new search of Mrs. Alden's. When they left, I was told to stay inside, lock everything, and wait for them to contact me. But the house felt tainted. Violated. Every creak from the wood, every pulse of the refrigerator, every soft scrape of tree branches against the siding sounded like someone's footsteps. Daisy refused to leave my side. She wouldn't even go into the kitchen without checking behind her. I tried to sit still. Tried to breathe. But my mind kept replaying those voicemails, especially the sound at the end. The truck. Why a truck? Who was moving her? And where? My phone buzzed again. A text message. No caller ID. Just one sentence. Stop looking. I froze. The text sat on my screen like an instruction meant for someone else, someone braver or stupider. I read it again and again, hoping I misunderstood it. But I didn't. 10 seconds later, another buzz. Another text. "We see you." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up. I reached for the curtain, fingers trembling, and pulled it back just enough to peek outside. A truck was parked 3 houses down. Not unusual, people park everywhere here, but this one was running. Engine purring softly. Headlights off. A dark silhouette sitting behind the wheel. Watching me. I stepped back quickly and shut the curtain, my chest heaving. My house suddenly felt too open, too exposed. Every window felt like a two-way mirror. I didn't know whether to hide, or run, or call the officer again. My phone buzzed one more time. This time, it wasn't a text. Another voicemail. I stared at the screen. The timestamp said it was left 10 seconds ago. My hands shook as I hit play. At first, I heard nothing but wind. Then, slowly, as if someone were leaning closer and closer to the microphone, I heard breathing. Not hers. His. It was the same breath I heard outside my window the night before. Then he spoke, the first clear words I heard from him. "You shouldn't have called them." My entire body locked up. My vision tunneled. I felt Daisy press against my leg like she sensed I was seconds from collapsing. I turned off the phone. And then, from outside, cutting through the stillness of the night, came the loud, unmistakable sound of a truck door slamming shut. I dropped to the floor instinctively, heart hammering, and crawled toward the hallway. I could hear footsteps on my driveway now. Slow. Heavy. Coming closer to my front door. Then, 3 knocks. Soft. Deliberate. And a familiar voice saying my name through the door. Mrs. Alden's voice. Hearing her voice at my door, soft, shaking, exactly the way it sounded in the voicemails, froze me in place. For a second, I thought my heart actually stopped. Daisy whimpered and pressed herself flat against the hallway carpet, ears pinned back. She knew something was wrong. I wanted to believe it was her. I wanted to believe she had somehow escaped and came straight to me for help. But the knocks didn't sound right. They weren't frantic. They weren't desperate. They were too controlled, too measured, like someone imitating what they thought a scared old woman would sound like. Then she spoke again. "Please, honey, open the door." The way she lingered on the word honey. Mrs. Alden never talked like that. She called everyone dear. Always dear. Never honey. I crawled closer to the kitchen, keeping low to the ground, staying out of sight of the front windows. My phone buzzed suddenly, loud enough that I flinched. I grabbed it and saw the caller ID. Unknown number. The same one from the voicemails. I didn't answer. And almost immediately, I heard the voice at the door change. The tone sharpened, flattening into something cold and male. "I know you're in there." Not her voice anymore. Daisy growled, quiet, but primal. The doorknob jiggled. Once. Twice. Then harder, like someone was testing how solid the lock was. Every muscle in my body went tight. I slid back farther, into the laundry room, clutching my phone. I typed the officer's number with shaky fingers, but before I could hit call, the jiggling stopped. Silence. I couldn't hear footsteps. No breathing. No movement outside. Nothing. And that was worse. I stayed frozen in place, for what felt like forever, before I finally forced myself to peek around the corner into the hallway. My house was still. Too still. I crept to the living room, inch by inch, trying not to make the floorboards creak. Just as I got within view of the window, headlights flashed across my wall, bright white, sweeping through the room. I ducked instinctively. A truck was turning around at the end of the street. The same one from earlier. I recognized the low rumble. The slow, deliberate roll. It drove past my house, at a crawl, as if the driver was staring at my front door. Then it kept going, and disappeared around the corner. I finally called the officer. I could barely get the words out. They told me to stay inside, and keep the doors locked. A patrol car would sweep the neighborhood. I paced my living room for what felt like an hour, though it was probably 5 minutes, trying to convince myself everything was under control. But my nerves were shot. My house felt tainted with someone else's presence. I sat down, forcing myself to breathe, when another thought hit me. How did he mimic her voice? The voicemails. The door. The tone. All slightly off, but close enough to fool someone who wasn't listening closely. Unless he had recordings of her. Real ones. On her actual phone. My stomach dropped. I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed my jacket, leashed Daisy, and left through the back gate, away from the street. If someone was watching my front door, they wouldn't see me leave the opposite direction. I headed straight toward the one place no officers had thoroughly searched yet. Mrs. Alden's backyard. Her yard was dark, and the motion light above her garage flickered strangely, like someone had messed with it. Her back door was padlocked on the outside, now a new, shiny lock that definitely wasn't there last week. Every warning bell in my body went off. Someone had sealed the door, from the outside. Daisy whimpered, and wouldn't step onto the porch. Her hackles were raised. She kept looking toward the far corner of the yard, where the old garden shed sat like a hunched shadow. I hadn't even realized I was holding my breath, until it came out in a shaky exhale. The shed door was cracked open. Just an inch. Just enough for someone inside to see out. I pulled out my phone again, hands sweating, and turned on the camera light. The beam cut a narrow line across the yard, right up to the shed door. And something moved inside. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing on the loose boards of the porch. Daisy started barking frantically now, backing away, pulling hard against the leash. I swept the light again. The door creaked. Slowly. Opening wider. I couldn't breathe. In the darkness of the shed, a shape shifted forward, small, frail, hunched. And then I saw her. Mrs. Alden. Standing barefoot on the dirt floor, wearing the same sweater she'd been wearing the last time I saw her alive. Her eyes, wide, glassy, reflected the light like she didn't recognize me. But before I could move, before I could say her name, someone else stepped into view behind her. A tall man. Holding something pressed against her back. Something metallic. I froze. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He reached out with his free hand, and slowly closed the shed door between us. The click of the latch echoed through the yard, like a threat. I ran. Not toward my home. Not toward the street. Not anywhere he'd expect. I sprinted straight into the tree line behind her property, darkness swallowing me whole. Daisy dragging at my heels, as I tried to breathe through the terror shaking every part of me. I didn't stop until the houses disappeared behind the branches. And then, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. Left at the exact moment he closed the shed door. I didn't listen to the voicemail right away. I couldn't. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of my phone. And Daisy was pulling me deeper into the trees, desperate to get as far away from the shed as possible. The night felt colder under the branches, damp and suffocating, like the air thickened the farther we ran. I finally stopped when I reached a clearing where the trees opened enough for the moonlight to spill onto the ground. My chest burned. I bent over, bracing my hands on my knees, trying to steady my breathing. Daisy circled me nervously, whining, tail low. I had never seen her like that, not once. I forced myself to pull the phone out again. There it was. One new voicemail. Timestamp, the exact minute the shed door had slammed shut. With a deep breath I wasn't ready for. I hit play. At first, there was just a low rustling noise, like fabric scraping against wood. Then, the unmistakable sound of Mrs. Alden sobbing. My throat tightened instantly. But the crying wasn't panicked like before. This time, it sounded resigned. Tired. Like she'd given up fighting. Then her voice came through. Weak. Barely above a whisper. I told him, "You come." A chill moved down my spine so fast my whole body locked. Why would she tell him that? Why would she think I'd get involved in something like this? Before I could process it, the sound shifted, heavy footsteps, then the clatter of something being dragged. A door hinge groaned, unmistakably the shed's hinge. And then a man's voice, low and sharp. "Move her." Mrs. Alden let out a small cry. Then the voicemail cut off. It didn't end with her breathing, or the engine of a truck, or a slam of a door. It ended with that command, "Move her." To where? And why was she still alive? I looked around the trees, suddenly aware of how exposed I was out there. The clearing felt like a spotlight. Every shadow looked like a person. Every branch looked like an arm reaching out. I needed help. Real help. Not patrol cars. Not officers who kept checking boxes on forms. I needed detectives. Search teams. Something larger than the 2 men who had been sent earlier. I dialed 911. But before the call could connect, a beam of light shot through the trees beside me, the sharp, white glare of a flashlight. I dropped to the ground instinctively, grabbing Daisy and pulling her with me behind a fallen log. My heart thudded against the dirt as the beam swept across the clearing. Someone was in the woods with us. I clamped my hand over Daisy's muzzle to keep her quiet. She trembled against me. I could hear the crackle of leaves, slow footsteps, methodical, as if whoever it was knew exactly where they were going. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Another text message lit up the screen. "We still see you." I almost threw up. I slowly, carefully, peeked over the log. The flashlight beam moved across the clearing again, left, right, then paused, pointing directly at the spot where I'd been standing minutes earlier. A voice called out. "My name's Detective Rowan. If you're out here, I need you to step into the light." I didn't move. That name meant nothing to me. The voice didn't sound familiar. But the timing, the voicemails, the messages, the footprints in my window, none of it lined up with the idea that someone legitimate suddenly found me in the woods. He called out again. "We're searching for a missing person. You're not in trouble. I just need you to come forward." It sounded rehearsed. Too rehearsed. I took a slow breath and waited. Listened. Footsteps behind him. Not branches snapping. Not leaves rustling. Footsteps. 2 people were out there. But only one was talking. The flashlight beam shifted as Detective Rowan, if that's who he really was, turned slightly. And in that split second, I saw it. A second silhouette, standing motionless behind him. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Familiar. The same shape I had seen outside my bedroom window. My pulse spiked so hard my vision sparkled. "No," I whispered, not even realizing I said it aloud. The second silhouette stepped forward into the faint light just enough for me to catch a glint. Metal, something reflective in his hand. Not a gun. A phone. My phone vibrated again. Another voicemail. I swallowed hard and pulled back behind the log, holding Daisy tight as the two figures moved deeper into the trees. They were searching for me. And they were close. I had two choices. Stay hidden and hope they passed, or move silently through the trees and pray I didn't make noise. I chose the second. I crouched low, keeping my weight on the sides of my feet, and moved as carefully as I could toward the darker part of the forest. Daisy stayed right beside me, breathing fast, but quiet. Every step felt like it echoed through the woods. But the voices behind me no longer sounded like they were calling for me. They were talking to each other. Whispering. Too quiet to understand, except for one sentence I heard clear as a knife sliding free. She's going to lead us right to her. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I ran. I didn't stop until I could see the glow of distant house lights through the trees again. By the time I reached the edge of the woods, gasping, scraping my hands on the bark as I pulled myself forward, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. Same number. This time I listened. The message was short. Just 3 words. She dies tonight. I staggered back, nearly tripping on a root as the weight of the words sank in. Suddenly the question I'd been avoiding for days finally became unavoidable. Were they threatening her? Or were they threatening me? For a long moment, I just stood at the edge of the trees, staring at the last voicemail notification, like it was some kind of countdown clock. My breath came in short, tight bursts. Daisy nudged my leg, whining softly, but even her touch felt far away. The glow of the neighborhood lights in front of me felt unreal, like I'd stumbled out of one world and into another, where nothing was familiar anymore. She dies tonight. The words repeated in my head, over and over, until they didn't even sound human anymore. But the more I repeated them, the more a cold, terrible certainty bloomed inside me. They weren't talking about Mrs. Alden. They were talking about me. I didn't know how, but deep down I felt it, felt the way the threats had escalated. Felt the way the truck kept returning to my street. Felt the way someone had stood outside my bedroom window, breathing, like they were already inside my life. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about who she had told him I was. And I didn't know why. I forced myself to move, stepping out of the tree line and into the backyard of a house at the far end of the street, the opposite direction from my home. Every instinct screamed at me not to take the main roads, not to step into the open, so I stayed behind fences and hedges, cutting through yards, until I reached the one place I thought might still be safe. Officer Hale's house. The one I'd run to before. I kept to the shadows as I approached. The porch light was on, and his cruiser was parked in the driveway. Relief washed over me so suddenly I nearly fell. I hurried up the porch steps and knocked fast 3 sharp raps that probably sounded panicked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder this time. Officer Hale? Please open the door. It's me. Still nothing. The porch light flickered. For a second, I wondered if he wasn't home. But his cruiser was right there. And I knew every officer in our area left early when they were on shift. If the cruiser was here, he was here. I tried the handle. Locked. I backed away slowly, dread slithering up my spine as I looked through the front window. The house was dark. Too dark. Not like someone sleeping, but like someone didn't want anything visible from outside. My stomach twisted. I stepped back onto the sidewalk and looked down the street in the direction of my own house. The dark shape of the truck had returned, parked 2 houses down, engine off, but unmistakable. They knew I was out of the woods. I turned and hurried toward the next nearest safe spot, the convenience store at the edge of the neighborhood, the one open 24 hours, the one with cameras and people, and light. If I could get there, I could call the station directly. Demand they send a whole unit. Demand someone listen. But as I started down the sidewalk, Daisy suddenly stopped walking. She planted her feet and pulled hard to the right, growling at something behind me. I turned. A man stood under the street lamp. Not the same silhouette from the woods. Not Officer Hale. Not anyone I recognized. He wore a hooded jacket, shoulders hunched like he'd been waiting a long time. His hands were in his pockets. I couldn't see his face. Only the bottom half of it, the jaw, the mouth. Smiling. A slow, deliberate smile. I stepped back. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he tilted his head, like a curious animal, and took one step forward. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to hear. But my hand moved on its own, lifting the phone to the light. This voicemail wasn't from the unknown number. It was from Mrs. Alden's number. For a split second, hope flickered inside me. Maybe, just maybe, she got away. Maybe she found a way to call. Maybe she... The man took another step toward me. Daisy barked, loud and sharp. I held the phone to my ear and pressed play. The message was quiet at first. Muffled. Like the phone was pressed against fabric. Then I heard movement, shuffling, breathing. Then her voice. But this time, she wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even afraid. She sounded calm. "I'm sorry." My chest tightened painfully. She had never sounded like that. Empty. Resigned. She continued, barely above a whisper. "I didn't want you involved, but he said you already were." A sharp gasp escaped me. Behind me, the man stepped fully into the street lamp's glow. I could see his face now. And I knew instantly. I had never seen him before in my life. The voicemail crackled again, her voice trembling this time, but not with fear. With guilt. "He said you would understand. He said you'd remember." I shook my head violently. "Remember what? I don't know him. I don't know any of this." The man smiled wider. The voicemail continued. "He told me what you did." I froze. Every part of me went still, like my mind couldn't even process what she was implying. My mouth went dry. The man spoke then, real voice, deep, cutting through the quiet street. "You shouldn't run from the truth." I stumbled back, shaking my head. "No. No, I don't know you. I don't know her. I didn't do anything." The voicemail ended with one last, breathy sentence from Mrs. Alden. "He said you did this to me." My legs buckled. The world tilted. I dropped to my knees on the pavement as Daisy barked frantically, pulling, tugging, trying to drag me away. But I couldn't move. Because whatever nightmare I thought I'd been living wasn't the nightmare at all. The nightmare was that they believed deeply, absolutely, that I was the reason she had disappeared. I managed to look up as the man stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. His voice was almost gentle when he spoke. "It's time to come with us." I scrambled back, adrenaline flooding me, survival kicking in hard and fast. I scooped Daisy into my arms and ran, not toward home, not toward the store, not toward any place familiar. I ran to the one place they wouldn't expect. The woods again. I didn't look back until I heard footsteps pounding after me. 2 sets. 3. More. It felt like the whole night was chasing me. Branches scraped my arms. My breath tore out of my chest. Daisy trembled against me. My vision blurred, but I kept running until I saw it, the faint outline of the old access road that led out of the neighborhood. If I could get there, if I could reach someone, if I could. A blinding light hit me from the left. Headlights. A truck roaring onto the path, cutting me off. I skidded to a stop, dirt spraying under my shoes. The driver door opened. A shadow stepped out. Not the man from before. Another one. A third voice called out from the tree line behind me. "Don't run. We're done running from you." I clutched Daisy tighter. My pulse thundered. I didn't understand any of it, what they thought I'd done, why they were after me, why they were using her voice, her phone, her guilt. But I knew one thing with absolute, cold certainty. They weren't taking me alive. I bolted left into the darkest part of the woods. And I didn't stop. Not when branches tore my skin. Not when their shouts echoed behind us. Not when Daisy yelped in fear. Not when the truck engine roared beside us. Not when my phone buzzed with another voicemail. Not when shadows closed in from every direction. I kept going until the ground disappeared under my feet. Until gravity swallowed us whole. Until everything went black. And somewhere, far away, muffled and fading, the phone in my pocket played its final message. A man's voice. Calm. Certain. Almost satisfied. I told her, "You wouldn't make it."